She walked past the catcalls like they were wind. Dust clung to her boots, sweat traced her spine, and her empty right sleeve swayed in the Texas heat. But Jasmine Carter didn't flinch. Because heroes don't always wear uniforms, and they don't beg for respect. She had once dragged wounded soldiers through enemy fire. She lost her arm in a war most had already forgotten. And when she came home, she was met not with parades, but with silence. Until one day, silence answered back with a salute. What began as cruelty on a sidewalk became a moment that shook a city and then the country, a team of elite veterans, a black SUV, a salute in broad daylight, a coin pressed into the hand of a child. This isn't just a story about the cost of war. It's about what we choose to honor and who we refuse to overlook. If Jasmine's courage moved you, subscribe. Join a community that celebrates resilience, dignity, and quiet strength. Because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is just keep walking. Jasmine Carter didn't come back to cheers or ticker tape. When her time in the army ended, no brass band played, no neighbors brought over casseroles. She returned instead to a narrow two-room apartment tucked behind a sun-faded strip mall on the east side of San Diego. Her unit back home didn't have dress uniforms or polished speeches, just silence. But Jasmine preferred it that way. Silence didn't ask questions. Every Thursday, at exactly 7:10 a.m., she stepped out her door with a canvas duffel swung over her left shoulder. It wasn't much, just her prescriptions, a small notepad with scribbled reminders, and at the very bottom, an old army cap, worn soft by time and weather. She hadn't worn it in years, but she never went anywhere without it. That cap had been through dirt storms, fire zones, and 2 tours. It wasn't just cloth, it was memory stitched into every fiber. Where her right arm used to be was now a prosthetic functional, matte and simple. No chrome, no polish, just steel and carbon and purpose. It connected at the shoulder and ended in a standard multi-grip hand. Every motion was deliberate, controlled, and to Jasmine, deeply familiar. She never saw it as what she lost, it was what allowed her to keep going. Her neighbors called her that quiet lady, always polite, always alone. She didn't volunteer stories, didn't chat much. She kept to herself. Occasionally, a kid would gawk at her arm or whisper behind their hands. Jasmine said nothing. She wasn't there to be explained. She was just trying to get through the day with dignity. At night, she rarely slept deeply. The quiet hours brought back the echoes of distant mortars, the static on a dying radio, the weight of a bleeding comrade cradled against her chest. She would sit by the window and watch car headlights stretch across the blinds like patrol lights sweeping a compound. The city was calm, but her mind never quite left the field. Jasmine never wore her pain like a badge. She wore it like armor, layered, heavy, but immovable. She didn't speak of what she had lost. Not out of shame, but because she didn't need to. The world had already moved on, but she hadn't forgotten what she gave up, and she never would. Certainly. Below is a 1-0-word narrative segment in English, aligned with the time-stamped content. 0, 0, 0, 38 and 2, 49 6, 2. Using American cultural standards and written for an older US audience, 65 plus. This portion presents the emotional and social tension at the heart of the story through deliberate pacing, strong imagery, and clear moral contrasts. "Somebody call the VORV, got a stray out here." The voice sliced through the dry afternoon air like a rusty saw. It came from Doug Simmons, foreman of the Midtown Development City, a man who spoke louder than necessary and found humor where no decent person would. He stood under a half-built steel frame, hard hat tilted back, chewing on a toothpick like it was a badge of authority. 50 feet away, Jasmine Carter walked along the cracked sidewalk bordering the construction site. Her steps were steady but deliberate. The sleeve on her right side hung limp and empty, swaying gently with each step. The prosthetic on her right arm ended at the shoulder, a matte black curve blending into her green t-shirt like it belonged there. To her, it did. Sweat darkened the back of her neck, clung to her temples. It was June in San Diego, and the temperature had already climbed above 90 degrees. The ground shimmered beneath the weight of heat, dust, and diesel fumes. Power tools screamed like mechanical banshees. Sparks danced behind scaffolding. It was the kind of noise that made most people look down and move on. But Jasmine didn't look down. "Hey, sweetheart, you lost? Welfare office is the other way," another voice called out. Laughter rippled across the work site. One man dropped his hammer and mimicked the stiff swing of her prosthetic. Another stumbled dramatically and fake screamed, clutching his leg in mock agony. A young girl, maybe 17, stood nearby holding her phone up, already recording. "Wait till TikTok sees this. RoboCop ladies trending today," she whispered to her friend, stifling a giggle. No one intervened. No one told them to stop. A few workers shifted uncomfortably but stayed silent. Even the assistant site manager folded his arms and looked on like it was just another joke on another job. Doug Simmons doubled down. "Looks like one of the Army's wind-up toys got loose," he shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. Jasmine said nothing. She kept walking shoulders back, head high, left hand holding the brim of her army cap like it was keeping her grounded. Her booted feet crunched softly against the sidewalk, and with each step, the rhythmic click of her prosthetic echoed like a metronome against the chaos. 1, 2, 1, 2. No hesitation. She had heard worse than this. Much worse. During her second tour in Afghanistan, she'd dragged a fellow soldier 3 city blocks under mortar fire. Her right arm had been lost when an IED tore through the side of their vehicle during a supply run. It took 11 surgeries and 6 months of rehabilitation before she learned to do basic things again: button a shirt, hold a pen, open a door. The prosthetic hadn't made her whole. It had simply let her keep going. And now here she was, being laughed at like a sideshow exhibit. Jasmine never broke stride, though her jaw tightened. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. But inside, something stirred. Not pain exactly. Something older. A fatigue that came not from the weight of the prosthetic or the summer heat, but from having to walk past ignorance in silence again and again and again. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. From the second-floor scaffolding, 3 workers in neon vests elbowed each other and leaned over for a better look. One of them shouted, "She probably picked up that arm at a garage sale." More laughter. Louder this time. Doug Simmons smirked, watching her the way a man might look at roadkill that refused to die. "Bet she never even saw combat," he said with a sneer. "Probably fell off a bar stool in San Diego." It was a line that got a full belly laugh from his crew. The sound bounced off cinder blocks and concrete walls like nails in a tin bucket. Cruel. Juvenile. Proud. Still, Jasmine didn't turn around. Instead, she slipped her left hand into the neckline of her shirt, pulling out a single chain that glinted softly in the sun, her dog tags. The metal was warm from her skin, the lettering dulled from years of wear. She pressed her thumb gently against the engraved lines. Carter, Jasmine A. O+, U.S. Army, Afghanistan. That tag had been around her neck when her Humvee flipped and caught fire, when she was pulled from the wreckage half-conscious, when the field medic covered her in a silver blanket and called her a damn miracle. Now, it was her reminder. You endured. You served. You mattered. The shouting faded behind her like bad weather finally rolling past. Jasmine walked on, 5 more blocks to go. Her boots gathered the red dust that blew across the sidewalk, and sweat trickled behind her ears. But she didn't slow down. She didn't speed up either. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching her falter. From the corner of her eye, she noticed something that hadn't been there the week before. A black SUV, idling a half-block ahead, tucked beneath the shade of a sycamore. Its windows were dark, the engine low and steady, like someone waiting, watching. Jasmine didn't know it yet, but something had shifted in that moment. Not in her she'd stayed steady. It was the world around her that was about to catch up. And soon, that same sidewalk where she'd once been mocked would become the very place where honor stepped forward to reclaim its ground. The taunts faded behind her like weak echoes in the wind. Jasmine Carter kept walking. Dust clung to her boots, gritty and red from the sun-baked pavement. A bead of sweat traced the back of her neck and slid beneath the collar of her faded green t-shirt. She didn't pick up the pace, didn't slow down either. With every step, she reminded herself they don't get to break me, and they sure as hell don't get to watch me fall. She was nearly to the corner when something caught her eye. Just ahead, parked about half a block away under the generous shade of a sycamore tree, sat a black Chevy Suburban. Its engine rumbled in a low, even idle. The windows were dark enough to keep whoever was inside hidden from view. But he wasn't hiding. He was waiting. Inside the vehicle, Ethan Cole sat motionless behind the wheel, one elbow resting casually against the top of the steering wheel. His eyes were fixed unblinking on the dust-covered job site just 30 yards ahead. He'd seen the whole thing. The mockery, the snide laughter, the cruel pantomime of her limp, the shame that others tried to pin on a woman who had walked through real fire. But Jasmine didn't shrink. She didn't look back. And Ethan watched her, with the kind of stillness you don't learn, you earn. He could see her holding that weathered army cap in her left hand like it was a compass. He heard the soft click of her prosthetic hitting the concrete with every step measured, purposeful. That sound brought back more than memories. It brought back a moment burned into his soul. Fallujah. Dust in his mouth. Shrapnel in his leg. His squad trapped after an ambush left their convoy in twisted pieces. Smoke thick enough to choke, and the distant whistle of incoming fire. He remembered thinking, "This is it. This is how I die." And then her. Through the chaos, through the sniper rounds, through smoke and blood and bone-rattling concussion, Jasmine Carter ran, once, then again, and again. She didn't stop until 3 lives, including Hishad, been pulled from that wreckage. On the 3rd run, she didn't come back whole, but she came back alive. She never asked for a medal. She never stood on a podium. Ethan did. He stood in dress blues 6 months later, accepting a bronze star, shaking hands with generals who never smelled burning gear or dragged a friend through a kill zone. But in his mind, he wasn't the hero. Jasmine was. And now here she was walking alone past a construction site, being laughed at like she was some sideshow curiosity, treated like a burden, a broken thing, a joke. Something inside Ethan lit up. Not rage, not indignation. Conviction. He glanced down at his right forearm and slowly rolled up the sleeve of his shirt. The ink was faded but clear. A golden trident wrapped around an eagle and anchor. The mark of a Navy SEAL. It wasn't for decoration. It wasn't for glory. It was a promise. And today, it was time to keep it. Ethan reached down and picked up his phone. His voice was low, steady cold steel wrapped in calm. "This is Cole," he said. "Send the convoy." No shouting, no grand speech. Just that. He ended the call, slid the phone into the console, and settled both hands back on the wheel. At that moment, Ethan Cole wasn't just a retired SEAL with scars and silence in his past. He was a brother in arms. He was a man who remembered. And he knew one thing with absolute clarity. No one mocked a soldier who had dragged his broken body from hell and lived to walk again. Not on his watch. Not without learning what real honor looked like. Jasmine Carter didn't hear the silence behind her, but she felt it. The laughter that once rang out like jackhammers was now scattered, uncertain. The dust still clung to her boots, and sweat trickled down her spine. But she kept walking, shoulders square, head high. She had no intention of turning back. Half a block ahead, tucked beneath the wide limbs of a sycamore tree, sat a black Chevy Suburban. Its engine idled low. The windows were tinted deep, hiding the man inside. But he wasn't hiding. He was waiting. Ethan Cole watched the scene unfold with an intensity that carved lines deeper into his weathered face. Elbows on the steering wheel, he didn't flinch. His eyes tracked Jasmine as she limped away from the taunts. He knew that gait, the rhythm of purpose, the sound of defiance. His mind slipped back not by choice, but with absolute clarity. Years earlier, a convoy outside Fallujah. The heat had been unbearable. Dust, sweat, and tension filled the air. Then the explosion. An IED buried deep beneath the pavement ripped open the lead vehicle. The fireball lit up the afternoon sky, flipping a Humvee like a tin can. 3 civilians screamed from behind the wreck. His squad was pinned. Chaos. And then Jasmine ran. She didn't wait for orders. She didn't hesitate. She ran through open fire, dragging a medic first, then a burned contractor, and finally, Ethan himself, unconscious, bleeding, wedged beneath twisted steel. On her third pass, the second blast took her down. She woke up in Germany, missing her right arm. She never told that story, never asked for thanks. Ethan received a Bronze Star. Jasmine received silence. And when she came home, the silence followed her. She tried to return to a normal life. Employers didn't see her Silver Star. They saw a liability. "This job requires 2 hands," one said. Another just slid her resume aside. No one asked what she'd done. No one wanted to know. She settled in a modest apartment outside San Diego, and even a trip to the grocery store meant bracing for pity, stares, or worse, the fake smiles. Jasmine was born in rural Kentucky, where dirt roads outnumbered pavement and the day began with roosters and tractors. Her parents ran a small farm, just enough soybeans and livestock to keep the lights on. Her father spoke little but worked hard. Her mother taught her how to mend clothes, ride horses, and fix fences before she turned 12. By 18, Jasmine knew the farm wasn't her future. The land was tired. Her parents were aging. She didn't want her life to shrink into the same rows she'd hoed since childhood. So she walked into the Army recruitment office with a high school diploma and grit. Basic training didn't shock her. She'd been hauling hay since she was strong enough to stand. She wasn't loud. She was disciplined, sharp, and fiercely loyal. After her second deployment, she had become the kind of soldier others followed without question. But Fallujah changed everything. And now, years later, she walked past a job site where men mocked her with laughter they hadn't earned, until something growled into their world. It wasn't a cement mixer. It was the unmistakable thunder of military engines. 3 black SUVs turned the corner, rolling in formation like a convoy on foreign soil. Their windows pitch black, paint gleaming. No sirens, no announcements, just momentum and precision. They pulled up and stopped, perfectly aligned, completely blocking the construction site's front gate. Every hammer fell silent. The driver's side doors opened, then the back. 7 men stepped out. Not in camouflage, no helmets, but they didn't need them. Their presence said everything. Tactical boots, clean black shirts, faded tattoos, scarred knuckles. These weren't rookies. These were warriors. They didn't shout. They didn't posture. They just looked. Measured. Trained. Unshakable. Doug Simmons, the foreman, froze. Just minutes ago, he had mocked Jasmine with bravado and swagger. Now he stood at the edge of the job site, clipboard dangling, sweat soaking through his shirt. Ethan Cole stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Who humiliated Sergeant Jasmine Carter? Doug blinked, trying to hold on to his grin, but it had already slipped. "Look, man," he muttered. "It was just a joke." Ethan turned slightly, just enough for everyone nearby to hear. Sergeant Carter served 2 combat tours in Afghanistan. She pulled 3 people, including me, from a burning Humvee under sniper fire. She lost her arm doing it. That's not a joke. Silence. A younger operator stepped forward, holding up his phone. "We recorded everything," he said flatly. "Every word, every laugh, every insult." Doug went pale. Ethan took another step. "She never asked for recognition, never wanted attention, but while you were playing foreman, she was saving lives." He turned back toward the street. "And today, she keeps walking because that's what warriors do." Then, for the first time, Jasmine turned around. and saw them. Jasmine Carter had nearly reached the end of the block when she heard it, not noise, but stillness. Not silence from ignorance, but reverence. That stillness that came when something sacred was about to happen. She stopped, and she turned. Across the hot stretch of asphalt, she saw them. 7 men in formation, boots shoulder-width apart, backs straight, hands down, eyes forward. No words, no movement. Only Ethan Cole, standing a few paces ahead of the others, slowly walking toward her. His steps were measured, not rushed, not dramatic. Just precise, the way soldiers walk when carrying something that matters. Jasmine didn't move. Couldn't. Her feet felt planted in that cracked sidewalk, like they were grown from it. Her chest tightened, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar weight of being seen. Ethan stopped just a few feet in front of her. He looked at her. Really looked. Not at the empty sleeve, not at the sweat or the dust or the way the sun caught her prosthetic. He looked into her. And then he stood at attention. "Permission to honor you, ma'am," he said, his voice even but full of quiet emotion. Jasmine blinked. For a moment, she thought she hadn't heard him right. But before she could speak, Ethan raised his right hand into a textbook military salute. And like a wave moving through stone, the 6 men behind him snapped to the same. The salute wasn't casual. It wasn't performative. It was regulation grade, battlefield etched, forged in blood respect. Jasmine's throat tightened. The world around her, the construction noise, the cars, the Texas sun beating down, all faded. Her own body moved before her mind caught up. Her right arm was gone, but her left came up in return. Straight, sharp, trembling slightly. Not from weakness, but memory. It was a salute she thought she'd never give again. Ethan held it for a long second, then slowly lowered his hand. From the pouch at his side, he pulled something small. It gleamed faintly in the sunlight. He stepped forward, opened his palm, and showed it to her. A silver-edged challenge coin. On it, the trident of Delta Force, the emblem of brotherhood. Rare, earned, never given lightly. "This," Ethan said, "you earned in Fallujah." Jasmine looked at the coin, then at him. Her lips parted, but no words came. "You were too busy saving lives to accept it," he added. And then he gently placed it into her palm, folding her fingers around it with both his hands. The metal felt heavier than it looked, not in weight, but in meaning. Around them, the small crowd that had gathered no longer whispered. They just watched, wide-eyed, some tearful. Even the teenager who had earlier filmed her in mockery now held her phone with both hands, trembling slightly, no longer recording for entertainment. Now, it was for remembrance. Somewhere behind the barricade of black SUVs, a flag fluttered in the heat. Jasmine Carter stood not as a curiosity, not as a relic, not even as a hero. She stood as someone finally seen. And this time, not for what she had lost, but for what she'd never given up: honor, and the right to walk through this world without apology. That salute, that coin, that moment in the middle of a sunburned street, they were not symbols of pity. They were declarations of truth. Not all heroes wear uniforms forever. Some just keep walking. By nightfall, the video had already spread across social media like a spark in dry brush. But it wasn't the usual viral clip built on shock value or cheap spectacle. This one was different. It was reverent, raw. The footage showed 7 veterans saluting a woman who had once saved them. A woman who had walked alone for years, now being honored in broad daylight. News stations picked it up within hours. Headlines read, "Veteran honored after years of silence. Delta Force salutes one of their own." And, "This is how you treat a hero." The clip ran on the evening broadcasts of major networks. Veterans groups reposted it with captions like, "That salute wasn't for show. It was for truth." By morning, the construction company's headquarters in Austin was flooded with calls and emails. Hundreds of messages poured in from across the country. Veterans, Gold Star families, former service members, teachers, and everyday Americans. The message was clear. Make it right. Within 24 hours, the company issued a formal public apology. It was posted on their website, shared across all platforms, and printed in a full-page ad in the Sunday paper. It read, "We deeply regret the actions and disrespect shown towards Sergeant Jasmine Carter. Her courage, sacrifice, and years of service to this country deserve nothing but the highest respect. We are committed to ensuring our work sites uphold values of dignity, honor, and inclusion." Effective immediately, the foreman responsible for the incident has been removed from this project and reassigned pending further review. Doug Simmons never returned to that site. But more important than his departure was what replaced him. At the entrance to the construction zone, just to the right of the main gate, a single red brick was embedded into the fresh concrete walkway. It wasn't tall or flashy. There were no lights or plaques. But it said everything. Etched into the surface in crisp, clear lettering were the words, "Sergeant Jasmine Carter, where honor is rebuilt." It was surrounded by a simple steel frame. Workers passed it every morning. Some stopped and bowed their heads. Others placed a hand on the edge before clocking in. No one joked anymore. That brick became more than a memorial. It became a mirror. In the following weeks, something began to shift. Slowly at first, then all at once. Employees who had once rolled their eyes at sensitivity training signed up for something newer voluntary program called Respect in the Trades. It wasn't mandatory. No one forced it. But they came anyway. At first, the sessions were awkward. Men in work boots and dusty flannel shirts sat in folding chairs, arms crossed, unsure what to say. But then one of them, Miguel, a veteran himself, spoke. He shared how his brother, also a Marine, had been turned down from 4 jobs because of his prosthetic leg. Not because he couldn't do the work, but because people were afraid of how he looked. That opened the floodgates. By the 3rd session, they were listening. By the 5th, they were talking. Regrets, missed moments, times they stayed quiet when they should have spoken up. A few brought their sons, some brought their stories, and slowly, the job site changed. Not overnight, but stone by stone, brick by brick, a new kind of foundation took root. They had mocked a soldier and learned publicly what honor truly costs, and what it means to pay it forward. A week later, Jasmine Carter stood backstage in the modest auditorium of Roosevelt High School. The folded metal chair beside her creaked as a teacher gave her last notes, but Jasmine wasn't listening to instructions. She was listening to her heartbeat. The principal had invited her to speak during Veterans Appreciation Week. At first, Jasmine had declined. She didn't consider herself a speaker. She didn't even consider herself a hero. But something had changed. Maybe it was the salute. Maybe it was the coin now tucked deep in her jacket pocket. Or maybe it was the fact that for the first time in years people weren't looking at what she was missing. They were seeing what she had always carried. When her name was called, Jasmine stepped out into the light. The room hushed. Rows of teenagers sat wide-eyed. Teachers stood along the walls. The American flag hung beside the stage. Jasmine wore a clean-pressed blouse, and for the first time in more than a decade, she wore her army cap. She didn't talk about battles, or wounds, or medals. She simply looked out across the sea of young faces and said, "Losing my right arm didn't make me weak. Choosing to keep walking, that's what made me strong." There was a pause. Not for drama, but for breath. Then she added, "And you don't need to wear a uniform to live with honor. Sometimes, honor means standing up when it's hard. Sometimes it just means not backing down." After the assembly, students formed a quiet line to shake her hand, to thank her, to hug her. But one moment stood out. A boy no older than 8, wearing a red hoodie, approached with a slight limp. From beneath the cuff of his sleeve peeked a prosthetic limb. His name was Benji. He looked up at Jasmine with big eyes and said, "My mum says I'm like you. She says I don't need 2 legs to be strong. She says maybe I can be a hero too." Jasmine knelt, so they were eye level. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the Delta coin Ethan had given her, and pressed it into Benji's small hand. "You already are a hero," she said softly, "because you didn't stop walking." Benji beamed. Not the polite kind of smile kids wear for grown-ups, but the kind that says, "Someone truly saw me." He ran back to his mother, who wiped her eyes beneath sunglasses. That moment would never go viral. But it would never be forgotten. And Jasmine Carter, quiet soldier from Kentucky, finally felt something settle inside her that no medal had ever given. Peace. The kind you earn, one step at a time. Life doesn't always test us with noise, it tests us with silence, with the choice to keep walking when the world looks away. Jasmine Carter's story reminds us that true honor isn't about applause or medals, it's about showing up, staying upright, and doing the right thing when it's hardest. She didn't need 2 arms to be strong. What made her powerful was her refusal to stop. For those of us who've seen the seasons pass, this story is a reminder. Our worth doesn't fade with age. Every scar is a story of survival. Every step we take, however, steady or slow, is proof that we still matter. And sometimes, the most powerful thing we can do is pass that strength on. If Jasmine's journey moved you, we invite you to be part of this community. Click subscribe to follow more stories of quiet courage, lasting honor, and lives that still have something to teach us all. Let's walk this road together with heads high, hearts full, and stories worth telling.